Two keys. Same keychain shape. Same silver color. One of them opens a front door that belongs to you now. The other doesn't open anything yet. It's sitting in a drawer, waiting for a lease that gets signed on Friday. Same age. 24. Same city. Same $3,200 paycheck hitting two different bank apps on the same Friday. One of them just signed 30 years of paperwork. The other signed 12 months. Neither one knows yet which decision was smarter. Nobody does. Not for years. You're about to watch both of them live out the next 2 decades. Same starting line, same income, same $28,000 sitting in a savings account 3 months ago. Then, one choice. Everything after that splits. $28,000. That's what was sitting in each of your bank accounts 3 months ago. Not each other's, your own. Same number, same city, same Friday paycheck of $3,200, twice a month after taxes. You were 24. Both of you. And this is where the story splits into two. Path A. The anchor. Age 24. You've been looking for 4 months. Zillow at midnight. Zillow during lunch breaks. Zillow instead of sleeping. You find it. A 2-bedroom starter home outside the city center. $220,000, small kitchen, a backyard the size of a parking space. It doesn't matter. It's yours. You put $22,000 down, 10%. The bank wants more paperwork than you thought a human being could generate in one lifetime. Pay stubs, bank statements. A letter explaining a $200 Venmo transfer from your roommate 4 months ago. You explain the Venmo transfer. Closing costs come to $6,000. Add it up, and that's the whole $28,000. Every dollar you had now sitting inside a house. Your mortgage, $198,000. 30 years. 7%. Your monthly payment, principal and interest, comes out to $1,317. The inspector walks the house with you 2 days before closing. He's got a flashlight and a clipboard and a way of saying that makes your stomach drop every time. He finds a crack in the foundation that turns out to be nothing. He finds a loose railing on the back steps that turns out to be something. $40 and a Saturday afternoon to fix. You sign 46 pages the day you close. Nobody reads all 46. You read maybe 12 of them closely. The rest you sign because everyone in the room is watching you sign. And stopping to read page 31 feels like it would embarrass everyone at the table at once. Moving day, you stand in the backyard with a shovel you bought that morning. You don't know what you're planting. You just know you want something in the ground that wasn't there yesterday, something that'll still be there next year. Path B, the current. Age 24. You find an apartment in 3 days, 1 bedroom, close to work, $1,400 a month. You sign a 12-month lease on a Tuesday and move in on a Saturday. You don't put all $28,000 to work. You hold back $6,000 first month, last month security deposit, a mover, and enough left over that a flat tire doesn't turn into a crisis. The rest, $22,000, goes into a broad index fund. 1 transaction. 11 minutes, start to finish. $22,000 invested. $6,000 sitting in cash doing nothing, on purpose. That's the whole plan. Your landlord walks the apartment with you before you sign. He points out a stain on the ceiling from a leak 2 tenants ago, already fixed. He doesn't ask you to sign anything explaining it. He just hands you the keys and moves on to the next unit down the hall. You sign 2 pages. Not 46. 2. Moving day, you keep 4 boxes unopened in the corner of your bedroom. Books you don't need yet. A lamp that doesn't match anything. You tell yourself you'll get to them. You don't get to them for 8 months. Nobody claps for either decision. There's no ceremony, no text from your parents saying you did it. One of you just signed 46 pages, the other signed 2. One of you put every dollar into a house, the other put most of it into a market and kept a cushion in reserve. Neither one of you knows yet what that trade actually costs. 12 months in, the mortgage payment doesn't change. It never will. Well, the principal and interest part doesn't. That's the whole point of a fixed-rate mortgage. But what that payment is actually made of, that changes every single month, and almost nobody notices. Here's what nobody tells you before you sign. Your first mortgage payment is $1,317. Out of that, $1,155, is the interest charge on the balance you still owe. Only $162 actually reduces the principal. Add property tax, $220. Add insurance, $100. Add what you're setting aside for maintenance, because something will break. It's not a question of if. $183. Total monthly cost, $1,820. And out of all of that, out of $1,820 leaving your account every month, $162 is yours. The rest is just the cost of the roof over your head. Same as rent. It just doesn't feel that way because you've got a deed with your name on it. You don't do this math in year one. You're too busy. A pipe under the kitchen sink starts leaking in October. You watch a video titled "Fix Any Leak in 10 Minutes, No Plumber Needed." 3 hours later, you call a plumber. $210. It comes straight out of the maintenance money. That's what it's there for. You tell yourself that twice. Like it helps. Your rent is still $1,400. Hasn't moved. Won't move for another 11 months. The gap between what you're paying and what the anchor is paying, $420 a month, goes straight into the index fund on autopilot. No decision required. No moment of willpower. By the end of year one, your original $22,000 plus 12 months of that gap has grown to roughly $29,200. You didn't do anything for that growth. You didn't work an extra shift. You didn't skip a birthday dinner. The money just kept showing up to work without you. Here's the part that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived both sides. You check your bank app the same way you check texts. Out of habit, not out of fear. Not anymore. That used to be a different feeling back when the number was something to be scared of. Now it's just there. Growing a little. Some weeks not. Meanwhile, somebody's tightening a bolt under a sink that isn't going to stay fixed for long. And somebody's parents are asking over the phone in that tone, "So when are you two buying something?" Neither one of you has an answer yet. That sounds finished. But the number that actually matters this year isn't the balance in either account. It's what happens to it when nobody's forcing you to add to it. 3 years, 36 mortgage payments. You've stopped watching a YouTube video before every repair. Your loan balance has dropped from $198,000 to about $191,500. $6,500 of actual principal paid down. It took 3 years and 36 payments to do it. The house itself has moved too. At 3.5% a year, your $220,000 house is now worth about $243,900. Add it up. Your equity, what you'd actually walk away with if you sold tomorrow, before agent fees, sits around $52,400. You built that, in 3 years, on a house that costs you more every year, whether you think about it or not. October, year 3. The water heater dies. Not the sink this time, the whole unit, $780. It comes out of the maintenance fund, same as always, and this time you don't watch a video first. You just call someone. That's new. You didn't decide to become the kind of person who calls a plumber while trying it yourself first. It just happened somewhere in year 2. An envelope shows up in a different mailbox. Rent's ticked up twice since you moved in. $1,400, then $1,442, then now $1,485. 3%, same as always. You read it once, you don't feel much of anything. This is year 3. You've done this before. You update the number in your budget app and move on with your Tuesday. Your index fund tells its own story. Over 3 years, about $14,200 in extra transfers have gone in, on top of the original $22,000. Between the contributions and the growth, your total sits around $45,000. $45,000 versus $52,000 for close. Not tied, the house is ahead by about $7,400 right now, but close enough that neither of you would call it a win. This is the part nobody puts in the headline. Renting versus buying, who wins? That question assumes there's a clear winner by now. There isn't. Not at year 3. Not even close to settled. One of you has a number that lives in an app and can move anywhere with you. The other has a number that lives in a house and requires someone to call about the water heater. Similar amount of wealth. Two completely different shapes. You fix a leaking faucet yourself this year. It takes 4 tries and 1 trip to the hardware store, where the guy behind the counter starts recognizing your face. You feel something when you finish it. Not pride exactly. Closer to relief. Like you did something the house needed, and it didn't cost you a favor from anyone. You get your security deposit question answered without even asking. The landlord fixes a broken cabinet hinge in 1 day. No charge, no conversation. You don't think about it twice. That's the difference. Nobody puts on a spreadsheet. One of you is learning to fix things. The other is learning not to need to. 6 years in. You've stopped checking your rent calendar. You don't need to. You already know what month the letter comes. This year, it's taped to the mailbox. Not slipped under the door. Taped right to the metal, where everyone in the building walks past it on their way to check for packages. New rent, $1,623. Meanwhile, your total cost of owning, mortgage, tax, insurance, maintenance, all of it added together, has climbed to $1,914 a month. You do the math standing right there in the hallway. The gap you started with, $420 a month going into your index fund, isn't $420 anymore. It's down to $291. Still real money. Still going in every month, automatic, no decision required. But smaller than it used to be, and you notice the shrinking before you notice the number itself. You think about asking the landlord if there's any room to negotiate. You draft a text on your phone standing in that same hallway. You delete it before sending. You already know what a 2-bedroom in this same building would cost if you left and came back. More than what they're asking you to pay to stay. So you stay. That's the whole negotiation. You don't say a word, and you renew the lease online in about 90 seconds. A different envelope shows up that same month. This one's from the county. Property tax reassessment. Your house is worth more now, so you owe more now. You don't love it. But you know it's coming a full year in advance, printed right there on the notice, and you've already budgeted for it by the time it hits. That's the difference. Not the money. The warning. Your loan balance has come down to about $183,500, $14,500 of actual principal paid off in 6 years. The house itself, growing at 3.5% a year, is worth around $270,400 now. Your equity, right around $86,900. You buy a stepladder that spring. 6-foot aluminum, $41. You didn't need one before. You rented for 6 years before this house and never once needed to reach anything above a doorframe. Now you're up there twice a month, clearing leaves out of a gutter, and you don't mind it. Your neighbor waves at you from his own gutter. 2 houses down, same ladder brand, same Saturday ritual. You didn't know his name for the first 2 years. You know it now. Somewhere between the second and third gutter cleaning spring, you became the kind of person who knows his neighbor's name, and you can't point to the exact day it happened. 4 boxes are still sitting in the corner of the bedroom, the ones from move-in day. 8 months, you told yourself. It's been 6 years. You open one of them this year. Not because you finally needed the lamp inside, but because a coworker asked if you wanted to grab a bigger place together, split the rent, and for about a week, you actually looked into it. You didn't move. But you opened the box. You almost didn't close it back up. You've had 3 different neighbors in 6 years. You know none of their names. Not because you're unfriendly, because none of them stayed long enough for a name to matter, and neither, technically, have you. You're just the one who happened to be there the longest. That's the part that doesn't show up in any account balance. Every year you don't move, the boxes stay closed a little longer. And every year they stay closed, moving gets a little harder to imagine. A friend from college texts you a picture. She just closed on a place. Granite counters, a dog in the backyard, a caption that says adulting. You like the photo. You don't write anything back for 11 minutes. You pull up your own numbers after you set the phone down. $72,700. grown from 22,000 in 6 years of a shrinking monthly deposit. You're not behind, you know that. But you also know something else. Nobody posts a photo of an index fund. Nobody hangs a caption on a number in an app. The house gets a photo, the number doesn't. That's not a financial fact. It's just true, and it sits with you longer than it should. The house is ahead this year by about $14,200. The lead keeps growing. Neither of you has any idea yet where it stops. 10 years, a decade of the same payment landing on the same day every month. Your mortgage balance has come down from $198,000 to about $168,300. $30,000 of actual principal paid off. Slow at first, faster now. Amortization front loads the interest, and by year 10, more of each payment is finally going toward the balance than toward the bank. The house itself, growing at 3.5% a year for a decade, it's worth around $300,500. Your equity, house value minus what you still owe, lands right around $140,400. You did that. 10 years of the same Tuesday. The portfolio's still growing, but the fuel behind it has changed shape. The original $22,000, left alone at 10% for a decade, has become roughly $57,000 on its own. Add 10 years of monthly contributions, starting at $420, shrinking a little every year as rent climbs, and the total sits around $118,800. $140,400 versus $118,800. The gap isn't closing, it's widening. $21,600 now, up from $14,200 at year 6. Here's why. The house doesn't just grow off what you put into it. It grows off the whole $220,000 sticker price every single year, whether you touch it or not. The portfolio only grows off what's actually sitting inside it. And every year, less new money is going in because the gap between rent and owning keeps shrinking. Two different engines. One running on the full weight of the asset, the other running on a monthly deposit that's slowly running out of room. Same week, same month. Both of you get an email. Different companies, same city on the other end. Denver, a better title. 30% more money than either of you is making right now. For the renter, it's not really a decision. It's logistics. Give notice. Pack the boxes. The same 4 from move-in day finally actually opened and taped shut again, for real this time. 60 days later, you're unlocking a different door in a different state. That's it. That's the whole process. For the homeowner, it's a different kind of email entirely. You sit with it for 3 days before telling anyone. Saying yes doesn't just mean packing. It means calling a realtor and finding out that selling costs 6% of whatever the house sells for. Close to $19,000 gone before you even see a check. Or it means finding a property manager, becoming a landlord in a city you no longer live in, hoping some stranger pays rent on time every month and doesn't put a hole in the wall you patched yourself 2 years ago. You run the numbers 4 different ways. None of them feel clean. You turn the offer down. The house didn't force you to say no. Nobody made this decision for you. But the cost of leaving made it heavier than it should have been for a 30% raise. Heavy enough that staying started to look like the easier math, even if it wasn't the better one. Your friend takes the Denver job. 3 years of careful research into a neighborhood she picked before ever setting foot in it, and she leaves it behind in 8 weeks, the way you leave a hotel room. No grief in it, no second guessing, just new door, new key, same person walking through it. You watch her post about the move online, new apartment, new city. A caption that says starting over again. You don't feel behind. Your equity's still ahead of her portfolio by over $21,000, and you know it. But you feel something quieter sitting next to that number. Like you built a thing that's very good at growing and very bad at moving. And it turns out those are 2 different skills. And you only picked one of them 10 years ago without realizing you were picking. The gap is bigger than it's ever been. And it's about to get bigger still. 15 years. You're 39 now, both of you. Your equity's sitting at $222,000. It hit its widest lead over the portfolio last year, year 14, $24,591 ahead, the biggest the gap has ever been. You didn't know that at the time. Gaps don't announce their own peak. You only see it later, looking back at the numbers. This year, something smaller happens first, before the bigger thing. The monthly transfer that's been running since year one, the one that started at $420, the one you set up and never had to think about again, is down to $14. $14. That's the entire gap left between what you pay to rent and what the anchor pays to own. You almost turn the transfer off completely. It feels less like investing and more like a formality, a symbolic gesture toward a habit that used to mean something. You leave it running anyway. $14 a month, same as feeding a parking meter. You don't know why you keep it. You just do. Then March happens. The market drops, not a dip, 30% over about 4 months. Your portfolio was tracking toward roughly $290,000 by spring. By the time the drop bottoms out, it's sitting closer to $203,000, $87,000. Gone, on paper, in a season. You open the app one night and just sit there, not panicking exactly. You've read enough to know what a correction looks like. But knowing something in theory and watching it happen to your own number are two different feelings entirely, and nobody tells you that until you're the one holding the phone. A coworker in the break room says he pulled everything into cash back in February. Says he saw it coming. Says he's waiting for the bottom before he gets back in. You nod along. You don't tell him you have no idea when the bottom is because neither does he, and neither does anyone who's ever said that sentence out loud. Your transfer is still scheduled for Friday. $14, same as always. You almost turn it off. Your thumb's actually on the toggle. You don't pull it. Friday comes. The transfer runs. $14 buys more shares than it would have 3 months ago because everything's cheaper now. It's not much, it was never going to be much. But it's the same machine, running the same way. Whether the number attached to it is $400 or 14. By the end of the year, the market's mostly clawed its way back. Your portfolio closes out at $197,700, a little below where it would have landed without the crash, but not far off. The house doesn't have a ticker. Nothing shows up in an app, but something else happens instead. You start reading about something called a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. Borrow against the house, use the cash to buy into the market while everything's on sale. A coworker mentions doing exactly that, says it's the smartest money he's made in years. You pull up the numbers. You've got real equity now, over $200,000 sitting in the walls around you. You could pull out 60, 70,000 of it. Put it into the same funds that just dropped 30%. Write it back up. You think about it for 3 days. You call your dad on day 2. He asks one question. What happens to the house payment if it doesn't ride back up in time? You don't have a clean answer. You notice you don't have a clean answer. It might have worked. The math wasn't crazy. Borrow at 7%, chase a market that's historically averaged 10. But it also could have turned a market loss into a housing problem. And there's no undoing that kind of mistake with a Friday transfer. You close the tab. You don't touch it. Here's what neither of you says out loud to anyone, not even to each other if you still talk, which you barely do anymore. You've drifted the way people do when their Tuesdays stop looking anything alike. The renter almost stopped a $14 transfer that had turned symbolic years ago. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about whether the habit still meant something once the number attached to it got small enough to ignore. The homeowner almost turned 20 years of standing still into a bet he didn't need to make. Both of you were one decision away from undoing 15 years of doing nothing wrong. The spreadsheet assumes discipline. Discipline doesn't assume the spreadsheet. Year end, the numbers read $222,000 for the house, $197,700 for the portfolio. The gap's down to $24,300, smaller than last year for the first time in 15 years, but barely. Neither of you notices that yet. You're both just glad March is over. 20 years, you're 44 now. Both of you. The mortgage has 10 years left on it. Your principal and interest payment 1317 hasn't moved once since the day you signed. Not $1. Property tax and insurance have crept up with the house's value, the way they always do. The house itself is worth about $437,600. You still owe roughly $113,200. Your equity, what's yours on paper, comes to $324,900. That's real. That's 2 decades of the same Tuesday stacked on top of itself. The rent notice arrives like it always does. 60 days out. This year it says $2,455. Do the math, and something flipped a while back. At year 1, rent was $420 cheaper than owning, every single month. Somewhere around year 16 the lines crossed, and rent became the more expensive number for good. There's no finish line coming for it either. The mortgage has 10 more years and it's gone completely. The rent doesn't. It just keeps climbing. But the monthly gap disappearing didn't stop the portfolio from growing. It just stopped it from growing the way it used to. 20 years of that original $22,000. Plus 5 years of shrinking contributions before they hit zero, plus 15 years of pure compounding after that. The total sits at approximately $318,450. $324,900 versus $318,450. On paper, the house is still ahead by $6,450. 20 years and the homeowner never actually lost the lead. Not once. It peaked at year 14, $24,500, and it's been shrinking ever since, but it never crossed zero. If you stop the story right here, on paper the house wins. Except neither of you is on paper. Both of you would have to actually turn these numbers into money you can spend. And that's where the story changes shape one more time. The renter can sell $10,000 of index fund on a Tuesday afternoon and have it in his checking account by Thursday. No agent, no inspection, no 30-day close. Whatever the portfolio says it's worth, that's close to what he'd actually get. The homeowner can't do that. Selling the house means 6% to closing costs and agent fees before a single dollar hits his account, roughly $26,300, gone in the transaction itself. Net proceeds after selling, $298,600. If both of you sold and liquidated everything today, the renter would walk away with roughly $19,800 more. That's the twist. Not renter wins, not homeowner wins. The house was ahead the entire time you were measuring wealth on paper. The renter only pulls ahead the moment both of you need the money in your hand. Sit with that for a second, because it's not the story you'd expect from a video with this title. For 14 straight years, the homeowner's lead grew. It peaked at $24,500, and it never gave that lead back, not on paper, not for one single year. The renter spent 2 decades investing a shrinking gap that hit zero 5 years before the finish line, and somehow still built something worth almost as much as a house. You can't sell 8% of a kitchen if you need cash next month. The homeowner's wealth is real, but it's locked inside drywall and a foundation in one specific city, tied to one specific local economy, one specific school district, one specific set of neighbors. If that town has a bad decade, there's no rebalancing your way out of it. You own one asset, one bet made 20 years ago that this particular street in this particular city was the right one. The renter's $318,000 lives in thousands of companies at once. It doesn't care what happens to any single zip code. Nobody's fixing his water heater at 11 at night. Nobody ever has in 20 years. But nobody's ever handed him a set of keys and said, "This is yours," either. You stand in your kitchen, the one you can't sell 8% of, and you think about the shovel from year 1. Whatever you planted back then is a tree now, tall enough to shade half the yard in the afternoon. You didn't know what you were planting. You know now. 4 boxes don't exist anymore. They got unpacked for good somewhere around year 12 in a different apartment than the first one, in the same city he's still choosing to be in. Not because he has to. Because he still can leave, and somehow, that's exactly why he stayed. Neither of you says the word winner. The house was ahead every single year for 20 years. The number that finally mattered most was never on either balance sheet. It was whether the wealth could turn into cash the day you actually needed it to. One of you owns a place and owned the lead the whole way there. The other owns a number that was always a little behind and turned out to be a little more spendable. If you'd stop this story at year 19, the house wins. Clean, uncontested, no asterisk. 20 years of the same payment beat 20 years of a shrinking transfer, and it never once gave up the lead to get there. That's not the story most people expect going in. It's not the story this video's title might have led you to expect either. But it's the honest one, and the honest one is more useful than the clean one. The homeowner built $324,900 of equity on paper. $298,600 once you account for what it actually costs to turn a house into cash. He did it by showing up for the same payment on the same day without missing one for 240 months in a row. The renter built $318,450 by doing a different boring thing. Investing a gap that started at $420 a month and shrank year after year down to $14 and then to nothing at all 5 full years before the story ends. Notice what that means. The renter's engine ran out of fuel in year 16. Everything after that, nearly $100,000 of growth, came from money that was already sitting there, compounding on its own, while he did nothing but leave it alone. Neither of these numbers is luck. Neither is timing the market or picking the right zip code before it got expensive. It's the same discipline, wearing 2 different outfits, and one of those outfits simply ran out of new material to work with a lot earlier than the other one did. And here's the part that actually matters underneath both of those numbers. Somewhere around year 15, the renter almost turned off a transfer worth $14. $14, barely worth the notification. He kept it running anyway, for no reason he could fully explain, and that $14 a month kept compounding for 5 more years after it stopped being a serious sum of money to anyone. Somewhere in that same year, the homeowner almost turned 20 years of standing still into a bet he didn't need to make. He had the paperwork open. He had his father's one unanswered question sitting in his chest. He closed the tab instead. Neither of those moments shows up on a chart. Nobody graphs the transfer that almost got canceled. Nobody graphs the loan that never got signed. But those 2 moments are the only reason either number in this story is real instead of a cautionary tale. That's the actual fork. Not rent versus buy, it's discipline versus almost. You could hand these same numbers, the $28,000, the 7% rate, the 3% rent increases, to 2 different 24-year-olds and get 2 completely different outcomes. The spreadsheet was never the hard part. The hard part was a Friday in year 15, transfer set to $14, market down 30%, thumb on the toggle and choosing to leave it alone anyway. That's the asset, not the house, not the portfolio. The showing up, especially on the Tuesdays when the number attached to it barely felt like it mattered anymore. Somewhere in Greenville right now, someone's 24 years old, standing in a hallway with a phone in one hand and a lease in the other. She hasn't decided yet. A few blocks over, someone else is sitting in his car outside a house he's thinking about making an offer on, running the numbers for the 4th time that week, trying to talk himself into being ready. Neither of them knows that one path is about to lead for 19 years straight. Neither of them knows the other path only wins in the one moment that actually counts. The moment you need the number to become cash in your hand. They think this is about a house, or a portfolio, or being smart with money. It's not. It's about whether they're still going to make the transfer when it's grown so small it barely feels like a decision at all. The key changes hands on a Tuesday. Somewhere else, a lease gets signed on a Friday. Neither one is the mistake. What happens after? That's the only thing that was ever the decision.